Congresswoman, welcome into the back room.
Thank you for having me.
It's a real honor to have you here, especially all that you've been through and we've been through with you these last couple of months. So, we were originally scheduled to speak last Friday, 3 days ago, and at the last minute, you and your staff were notified of an active ICE situation at a nearby Mexican restaurant, and you rushed over. We've been seeing shocking clips coming from that scene. Tell us about what happened there.
Well, essentially, that is a restaurant that I go to all the time. We were going to have lunch there, and that's why it was like all of a sudden, all this stuff is happening. The road was barricaded by four vehicles. There looked to be anywhere from 30 to 40 agents just all over the place. And what we know now is that it was an investigation that was started under the Biden administration into these restaurants that are individually owned, but all like a chain. But at that time, we didn't know. And so I walked up just inquiring. I introduced myself. I have never looked people in the eye that looked through me like I was completely irrelevant. And, was getting pushed around, everybody else was. And so I introduced myself again, and there was one agent that came over and said, "We need you all to clear out so we can leave." I said, "Do you have anybody detained in any of these vehicles?" They said, "No." I said, "Okay." So I walk over and ask people to move. Everyone did, which I was, there's a lot of emotions happening there. And allowing them to go. So in one of the videos, you hear me saying, "Okay, go, now go," because they'd said if we move out of the way, they would leave. And really, it wasn't until Tucson Police Department arrived on the scene to help support their, keeping the community safe that they actually did leave. But, those agents were there for a fight. They wanted to incite something, and you could see it in their eyes. And, this community, especially right there in Barrio Hollywood, is very tight knit. The families have lived there for generations. And so most of the people that were out there were people that, have their kids at the preschool, or were going to go to lunch, or were just opening their doors and walking out of their front yard. And it was chaos.
Yeah, and so DHS has denied that you in particular were pepper sprayed or shot at with any sort of projectile. Clear that up for us.
I'll let the videos speak for themselves, right? So there are two different situations. There was one agent that I believe it's on Univision or Telemundo. You can see him with just a projectile spray, and they were calling it a bear spray or some sort of like mate, like that kind of agent that were shooting directly across people's eyes, like just indiscriminately. No one was coming at them. So what happened in that case is there was a member of the press who had press credentials, cameras. I mean, he is at many, many events. He just literally shifted right at the time where he got the brunt on his face. And I was turned, so I had it on a side of my face here. And then one of my colleagues and team members had it on the other side because we were both turned in a way that's where it caught us. So no, I didn't, but that person was shooting directly at the crowd in the eyes. And then there was a tear gas sort of, pellet kind of thing. And that was the white spray. And that was, I don't know how you deny that wasn't directed at me. It literally was right at my feet. And so I think that, dispersing pepper spray like that without warning is just very scary. And I, at that point, have identified myself directly. And then it was a fairly small crowd where I was standing. So most of them were members of the media, which that's who the pepper spray was deployed to. And I don't think Secretary McLaughlin understands how pepper spray works. They fire from a distance, but their pepper spray canisters create a choking cloud. And, one of the agents on the field literally looked and fired a pellet directly at me. So, and I just wonder if that's the way they're going to treat a member of Congress. I mean, they're treating everybody else like they did me or worse. And it was very jarring. I mean, I'd seen him on TV, just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
watch the news, but to actually be there and realize that there are people that don't think of anyone other than them as human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that seems the cruelty. We keep hearing this over and over again. The cruelty seems to be the real goal here, and we have seen all the clips. I mean, I've seen clips of an agent standing a foot away from a young woman and just literally spraying her in the face with pepper spray, and
Yeah.
she was clearly not doing anything provocative.
And also,
Uh,
I think it's interesting that DHS has changed their story three different times. First, it was she wasn't hit. And then it was like, well, she got some. And then it was like, well, she deserved it. So,
right.
those scenarios is like, and really, this isn't about what happened to me specifically. It's like of the people that were really, truly like injured. I mean, it's very scary. And we were pushed around quite a bit. I mean, I had my pin totally visible. I had one of my team members saying, this is a sitting member of Congress. I kept introducing myself, and this woman literally said, I don't care. Yeah.
They're acting like thugs. So I'm glad you just brought up what you said because on a broader national level, what are your biggest concerns about Trump's immigration policies, these ICE tactics and rhetoric like we've just seen recently, targeted at Minnesota's Somali community?
It's increasing the political violence like tenfold on a regular basis. And so where we are now is frightening. Someone stopped in front of my house yesterday, and 3 weeks ago, I wouldn't have thought anything of it.
Right.
And now I have to worry about why they're there. My kids are there.
Hmm.
My husband, we live there. And so, I was thinking about Representative Omar, who I stand firmly with in her defense, but it's like these targeted attacks of Trump at individuals that affect entire communities. And this right here, I I'm just very worried about, what has to happen next. Does somebody have to actually be killed? And I think that Trump wouldn't change a thing
Well,
about
it really
trying to
doesn't, that we
divide
used
our community.
yeah, we used to ask questions like that. And then we saw after all the warnings about deploying troops all over the American cities, we saw a National Guard member get assassinated in DC. Did it change anything? Did it change his attitude? Any policies? No, because he doesn't care that people
No,
get killed.
and we have to rein in this lawless agency and demand accountability. And that's one of the first things I'm going to do. I appreciate, Representative Espaillat and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus demanding answers, but we have to. Senator Kelly in Arizona here reached out to me and said, let's start asking some questions because this is documented and they don't care.
How do you do that as a minority party?
Exactly. Well, I mean, we have to keep pushing for accountability and ask for hearings. And, we have a hard time. We have a hard time getting through to anyone until people are there. I wonder if some of my colleagues on the other side in Arizona were there where I was, if Siskamani would have been pushed around and he could see the fact that they don't care who you are, that their goal there is to incite like a media blitz. I mean, you
Sure.
can see it. I mean, it was so chaotic. It wasn't done like in a way to try to disperse a crowd. They were trying to pick a fight.
Right.
And that made it very, very scary for me.
Yeah. And so, how damaging to Trump and the Republican Party do you think these policies and tactics have been, especially with an eye on the midterms next year?
Yeah. So since this incident, I've 5 different businesses have contacted me directly to tell me that that's what happened to them, that they came in under the this idea that we're doing an IRS kind of audit. They came in and checked everyone's permits, no arrests, no consequences, but it causes fear. And so every single one of those businesses said, our business has not come back because community members are afraid to come out.
And do you know if those are, or at least some of them, Republican-owned businesses?
Right now they're very mom and pop and really targeted to the communities that they serve. So carnicerias nearby, Mexican restaurants, an Indian restaurant. um, uh, depending on where they are in the community. And what they're doing is they're going in, if they find a violation that is a lot of times just a clerical error, they're charging people, one restaurant, $59,000 in order to pay um, the federal government their back due. They're charging all these fines and fees and making it really near impossible for these businesses to reopen. Many of them have not really recovered from the closure of COVID. So now we have this on top of attacks on immigrant communities and communities
Hmm.
of color. People are not going out. I mean, I was out in a restaurant that used to be packed on a Friday night, and we were the only people there an hour before closing.
Yeah, and that's why I asked, because the general assumption would be at least that some of these mom and pop businesses, small businesses, are owned by people who voted for him last year, people who traditionally vote Republican. So I know he's always saying things like, well, we're going to cut services to Democrat, to liberal businesses and liberal people. But what he doesn't seem to understand, what the party doesn't seem to understand, is all of these things impact their own base.
Yeah.
I guess we're seeing it in this past November's election. We're seeing it in other special elections in terms of how the margins are being shrunk. We're seeing the impact among the base, among independents. It's a cell phone, isn't it?
Yeah, and what worries me so much about what is happening now is that he's causing fear.
Hmm.
Talking now we're talking about elections, and I worry, what is that going to look like in blue states? Is he gonna, disperse the National Guard and
Hmm.
have someone with a gun standing in front? I mean, just like there's a lot of accusations going around about, communism and, other countries. That's literally this authoritarian kind of fist down from the top down. That's
Hmm.
what he's creating. And what
Yeah.
this Republican Party fails to appreciate, as many, many, many of the people that utilize the services the most statistically come from very bright red states.
Sure, especially in the healthcare sector.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. You won your Arizona 7th District special election by 40 points. It was a really decisive margin. You became well known all over the country, perhaps in parts of the world, because you were forced to sit on the sidelines for almost 2 months while Speaker Mike Johnson decided when he was going to bring his caucus back to D.C. to be in session. What do you think the voters were saying about that result?
We talked a lot about policy. We talked a lot
Hmm.
about working families and an agenda that's going to support working people.
Hmm.
And everything we talked about drilled into that. It was about representation that is going to share the values that you carry. And this district is so diverse. It is, six different counties, rural, urban, and everything in between. The three ports of entry with Mexico and Arizona are in CD7. And so we have a lot of border communities and their needs are different. And it's not homogenous. We have farmers who statistically and usually are a little more conservative than I am, but they're counting on me to bring forward comprehensive immigration reform and protect water rights. And so there are so many groups that are like, we might
Right.
not be united in this one thing. But, right after this, I'm meeting with a group of a union that supports and represents federal workers who are afraid that every single time there is a shutdown, and with this Republican Party, it seems like it's happening every 3 months, that, they're going to be on the chopping block.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing is it took almost 2 months for him to swear you in, but Matt Van Epps, who just won his special election in Tennessee, was sworn in less than 48 hours. Politics
Yeah.
is a dirty game, isn't it?
I was saying if I were Republican, I would have been sworn in already. And
Sure.
that proved it 36 hours in under 36 hours. And what it made people, I mean, both sides of the aisle actually were like, what kind of system is going on here? Like when you have a dual, whether they voted for me or not, I was elected. It was a clear process. There was not ambiguity about it. And then at some point, my race was certified. And then, I mean, it's like, so what other proof do you need? And so we are really going to be pushing, hopefully, a bipartisan effort to make sure that nobody is ever in this situation again, regardless of who the Speaker of the House is or regardless of who the member-elect is.
Yeah. And many people, myself included, believe that your delay was mostly about Johnson's scheme to keep the Epstein files from becoming public. Do you see it that way?
I do. I do.
Hmm.
It didn't really make sense any other way. And I think that, Trump saw the writing on the wall. I'm sure his big push to try to silence and remove some of at least one of the signers on the discharge petition. We're listening to Marjorie Taylor Greene talk about, that his attacks on her she's in fear for her life and the life of her
Hmm.
children. I mean, it is this constant escalation of if you've not pledged allegiance to Trump, then we're enemies. And he's creating this division and is purposeful about it. And I remember it must have been like 3 or 4 months ago. A member of the press asked him, how are you going to unite our nation because we're so divided? And he said, "That's not my job.
Right.
It's not my job."
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, when you see someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene have a very public, very nasty rift with him, I always think, like, what are the other Republicans thinking? Like, if he can do this to her, she was his fiercest, most loyal ally, and look what's happened. He's called her a traitor. It fascinates me that they still pledge this fealty to him, knowing that their turn is coming.
Yeah. And I think that they're all very afraid about um, the midterms, especially members of Congress.
Hmm.
Nobody wants the kind of resources that Trump has access to go after them. But I do think many people have buyer's remorse right now. They wanted someone to talk about our economy and improve it. And Trump got down to the like in the weeds on let's talk about the price of eggs. And that resonated with people because everyone was struggling. And now you see that the struggle is worse. There are people that are making decisions about do I fill this prescription or do I have food? And so many of the programs that serve our most vulnerable communities have been cut to the point that they are not effective. And we have people that are struggling to eat every day in this country, the richest country in the world. It's disgusting. It's disgusting what he's done to people that need help the most by enriching his buddies and himself
And himself
and himself. I mean, in the billions of dollars.
and his kids.
I mean, it's all one big family. And I love the fact that people are now calling on members of Congress to take the pledge to not, trade stocks. I think that's great.
Hmm.
But, you know, I think there has to be some accountability all the way up the chain. And Trump, because he's doing it out in the open, people just seem to think it's fine. Sure, I'll go ahead and take that $400 million plane. Sure. We're going to have private donors fund an expansion and a remodel at the White House. What do you think those people are getting for that investment? Why aren't people asking this question? Because there is no way that Biden or Obama or Clinton would have been able to ever get away with this. Nobody should.
No, when you think about the Hunter Biden laptop
Oh my
and
gosh.
and you look at the money that Eric Trump and Jr. and Kushner and even Barron, he apparently made $150 million in some crypto scam that came through his dad's. But I think where it matters at the polls, there is accountability. They may not be ready to hold each other accountable, but if you look at the election, his special elections, his polling, the fact that he's underwater on all of his signature issues like immigration and the economy, inflation. And that's the startling part. It's like none of them seem to care. They're just like watching themselves sitting on the Trump Titanic, watching as they head towards the iceberg.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change.
Yeah, I know he's making some promises about people getting a check. And
It's
sadly,
nonsense.
for some people, that'll be nice, I guess. But if you look at the cut of those subsidies and what that means to families, in our community, it means probably 5 rural health hospitals are going to be closed because they'll be overwhelmed with the number of people coming in that don't have insurance and the federal government won't be reimbursing.
Mm.
They're proposing a lot of cuts to criteria on healthcare, and they're just going to make it harder and harder. And my frustration is that from the moment ACA passed, the Republicans have had nothing but horrible things to say about it. You've been in power for a minute. During the Trump administration, you had an opportunity. Here we are, December, and they're talking about we're going to put something forward together. They have
13 years they've been saying that.
concepts of a plan, right?
Yeah.
Years to figure this out. And now people are actually making the decision to opt out of having any kind of health care because
Yeah. It's really disgraceful because he and they have been promising for 13 years to repeal and replace and bring something better, but they don't care. They don't care about health care for the working and middle classes. So they're never going to put that forward. There's two things that I think are major scandals that could seriously impact his presidency and his administration. That's Epstein, which we've been talking about, as well as this Hegseth Gate stuff. There's a deadline coming up on the 19th for the Epstein files, the full files to be released by the Department of Justice. And there's also calls for that second, I'll call it a restrike video, because it's technically not a double tap. If you listen to enough generals, you realize that double tap means something totally different, like two consecutive strikes, not one that happened 40 minutes after the other one. But do you think we're going to see these Epstein files? Do you think we're going to see that video? Because I sit here at home and go, okay, I see Democrats saying it was murder. I see Republicans saying, oh, these two guys were ready to strike again or do whatever they were going to do to harm America. And I'm like, just show us the video, right? Just show us the video. I got eyes. I got a brain. I could see. But you have Democrats saying release the video. Republicans don't want to release the video. Pretty much tells you everything. So where are we going to go with these two cases?
And you know what I think is really hilarious and shows how unqualified and inept this administration is Trump makes promises like we're gonna whatever we have will be released, and
Yeah.
Hegseth is like, we don't want to do that right now. Um, they have to release information, and the public is waiting, chomping at the bit for it. Because Trump also, remember, we didn't need to have any action in Congress to release the files. He could have
Right.
done it himself.
Right.
So the fact that we did it, right, and we're waiting and waiting patiently, I think, as time has passed. Time passed a long time ago for us to have this conversation. And I think that under the law that was signed, the DOJ has until December 19th, and ultimately the DOJ has discretion about what's going to get out and what isn't. So my worry is that I'm not 100% confident that we're going to get everything that we're asking for. But if they do try to do anything, then we have people like you and people like me that are going to call them out on it, and the American people that they have to respond to.
Yeah, I totally agree. What should happen with Pete Hegseth and this whole scandal with the Department of Defense?
He should have been removed. The
Hmm.
first time we had the signal gate issue, he should have been removed. He's clear that he's completely unqualified for this job. And all you have to do is listen to anybody else that has ever worked anywhere near intelligence.
Right.
You see it. He's just unqualified, totally.
Do you
And
think his days are numbered?
I hope so. I
Hmm.
think that he's caused enough problems to Trump that Trump might show him the door or give him another position. Probably one with more power but less authority, maybe. I have no idea. Somewhere where it's like, oh, look, you get a title change, but now you don't have direct oversight over thousands of employees and able to yeah, he's causing a lot of problems for Trump, I think.
Yeah. Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's a very smart, calculating, crafty politician with a ton of capital, political capital. What do you think's going to happen with her next? What do you think is up her sleeve?
I feel like she's running for another office.
Hmm.
I think that, this is an appeal to try to kind of win over people that are on both sides of the aisle to come. But we have to remember that she empowered Trump. This, who we have in office right now, and the fact that she supported many of the things that he said, she doubled down on, his anti-immigrant, anti-working people, splitting communities apart, stereotype and racism and sexism. She supported all of that. Was his, and we'll say it, I was his biggest fan. So I'm glad that she's apparently had her eyes open because now she's unfortunately having to experience what many in elected office have been experiencing for years when Trump says something negative about you, and then all of these crazies come after you because Trump said to.
Yeah. Congresswoman, I'm so glad you are in Washington. I think you're going to do a fantastic job. I think you're going to be one of the party's future stars. You're already a star in my book. Thanks for coming on and talking about your first few weeks, and keep up the good fight.
Thank you so much. You have a good day. Thanks.
All right, you too. Take care.